Hi.
Okay, I call the March 28th, 2019 Peninsula School District Board of Directors regular meeting to order. Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome. This business meeting of the Board of Directors is being held in public in compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act and is being live streamed. With regard to routine matters, board members have reviewed the agenda and have had the opportunity to clarify questions with the superintendent prior to the board meeting. Such matters are often processed without additional comment or debate. So we'll start. Are there any changes to the agenda? Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. It has been moved by David and seconded by Marcia to approve the agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The agenda has been approved. We are going to begin tonight with the superintendent's report. Dr. Jarvis will now give his report to the board.
Thank you, Madam President. It is my pleasure to share with you first a piece of news you may not be fully aware. We had an opportunity that came our way to at least consider becoming a school district that hosts the junior ROTC. Those particular units usually come available about once every 15 or 20 years, and there's a long waiting list. We can't promise in any way that we can get that unit, but I wanted to inform the community and the board that I have, in fact, we have submitted a letter on behalf of the school district, and we've begun the process of at least discussing whether or not we would be eligible for some form of that junior ROTC, and that could ultimately lead to a unit in the Peninsula School District in one of our schools. And I guess I've had for most of my career the opportunity to have units in various schools, and it's, in my opinion, a very fine addition for the kids and a great opportunity for those who are particularly interested. So I don't want to get hopes up so high that this is going to happen in the fall of 19 or that it even is going to happen for sure, but we are at least as a district exploring that option on behalf of the kids in the future. The excitement is also building pretty dramatically as we hire architects and surveyors and land use specialists and all the special consultants that are on your agenda to really move forward on behalf of the community that supported the bond issue. And I wanted to particularly point to not only the hiring of the architects. We have recommended 3 architects to you that you'll be acting on this evening, and 17 specialist consultants that are working on some or all of the 4 school projects. But we're also beginning all of the planning then that goes with the other 2 items, one of which is what do we do in the fall of 19, and we talked about that at the last study session and the study session previous to that, and we've had a chance to be out sharing with as many people as possible the basic plans. So I think that adds to the excitement, and I'm watching really a wonderful response of people who are willing to jump in and begin the planning. So you're going to hear a lot more about that, but we will be asking this evening for the formal approval of moving the schedule for school number 10 from its original 2022 completion date to the fall of 2020. It's that interesting one of delaying the start 1 year and not starting it as a partial. But I think just to make sure people understand that in the fall of 2020, we will open a complete elementary school. School number 10 will be full grown. We will open it with all flags unfurled, and the process this spring will begin selecting the principal, naming the school, working through all the details. we're working very hard to try to make sure that the communication really is throughout the school district and throughout the community. In that vein, and not just limited to the Capitol, but I am sharing with the board this evening, and will share with the community, that I'm scheduling a series of meetings roughly every 2 weeks, and I'd like to be out so I'll call it the superintendent on the corner. It may not be on the sidewalk, it may be at the library, it may be in other places where, if I can figure out how to turn that off, I will. So just trying to make sure that people get a chance to, if they have comments, if they have questions, if they just want to talk, in addition to a brand new phone. I can't even turn it off. It says silent. I apologize. But really looking forward to the opportunity to be available to people, to talk in the schools with the staff, to meet people, and in every way possible share with them the energy and the excitement and the planning, and answer questions of parents who are both excited and in some cases anxious about change that takes place. And I suspect there may even be some students who have some interest in questions. So we are moving forward. It is exciting, it is energizing, but the schedule continues to be very ambitious. And on that note, I will leave you to a long agenda that has many of these items contained, and just say thank you to everybody for really working through this planning process and being able to get to the place that this is how we'll use the Boys and Girls Club in the fall of 19, and this is how we'll schedule and solve the problems of 2020 and open the new school and set our schedule. I would just finish with one other item. On the 4th of April, our next study session, then our project managers will be working, all of us, and particularly you and the community, through charts and timelines, and looking at all 4 projects in timeline and detail, so that again we can keep everybody informed. And with that, I would conclude my report to the board.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, we will then, if you want to get the mic over to them, move on to comments from our student representatives. We have 2 here tonight. So Casey from Henderson Bay, will you please begin?
Well,
And
on the
get that mic right up there. Thank you. Want to hear you.
on the 19th, we had our fundraiser at Fondy's for the Guatemala trip, and it went really well. It was really awesome. It was very full. Even when we got there, couldn't not find a seat for a while. And let's see, we had career day, which was really cool. We had a career fair, and quite a few people came in from the community and just talked about different careers that we all got to pick from like a career cluster. That was really awesome, and yeah, we're doing cool things, and we're excited about graduation.
And you have there's 4 students going to Guatemala this year?
Yes, I believe so.
Excellent.
My name is Emily, and I'm from Gig Harbor High School. So this past, I think it was the last 2 weekends, we've had a couple teams from our school go to state. Most recently, the speech and debate team won first place for the 2nd consecutive year for speech. Knowledge Bowl just won 2nd at state, and it's the first year of Knowledge Bowl, so that's super exciting for our school. Our dance team just won 4th in state for their hip-hop piece. Currently, we have Make a Difference Week going on, and on Monday, we kicked it off with a speaker. And he's a motivational speaker named Keith Hawkins, and it was a super good and moving assembly. Finally, we have The Wedding Singer, which is our spring musical going on right now, and you can go see it Friday at 7, Saturday at 1 or 7.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. And Zipporah is not here tonight. Pardon? Yes, please. Okay. We'll move on to comments from the community. Members of the audience wishing to speak to the board are asked to identify themselves for the record before sharing their comments. In the interest of fairness, there is a 3-minute time limit. We ask that statements not be personally directed, abusive, or obscene. Please note that this is an opportunity to speak to the board, and that the board will listen but not engage in dialogue or offer a response. Thank you for respecting these guidelines. And we have Ron Witter.
Good evening. My name is Ron Witter, and I'm a fifth grade teacher at Discovery Elementary. I've been a teacher for a long time, but I've been at Discovery for about 16 years. I'm here as a building representative and would like to express views from our teachers, many of whom are in the audience tonight. You're going to cheer, right? All right. We recognize that you have some tough decisions to make about overcrowding, and we celebrate the passage of a bond that will get us to a much better place. We think it's important, though, to communicate our perspective as we reflect on our experience earlier this year when our second grade team was stationed at the Boys and Girls Club. Based on that experience, we feel we have a few areas of concern that we want you to consider. First, we'd like you to consider the exorbitant and disproportionate amount of time that will be required to move to a new school site. We're entreating you to be considerate of the effect your decision has on teachers' family lives, teachers' ability to take care of themselves, their ability to de-stress over summer break, and their ability to work their part-time jobs. Packing up a classroom is no easy task, and setting up classrooms in the fall is even more difficult. These moves happen at the busiest times of the year and can be very impactful. After getting moved in and set up, then the real work begins. It's important that our district leadership know that our second grade team worked very late every evening to make the Boys and Girls Club a workable solution in the fall. Hours and hours were spent after school in meetings with school staff to develop solutions to problems that emerged on a near daily basis. Only after concluding these meetings could teachers tend to their normal after-school duties of planning, preparing, grading, and contacting parents. The number of hours that our second grade team were obliged to put in is not sustainable, and we hope the district will identify reasonable accommodations and supports to prevent this from being the norm. Second, when bringing a new location on board, please allocate adequate staff in order to reduce the number of transitions back to Discovery Elementary. Every transition takes away from instructional time. The proximity of the Boys and Girls Club is not as close as many people think. Add to this the amount of time it takes to get students prepared to transition, then double that, because we'll have to do it all over again once we get to our location. In order to prevent lost time, students require, and they deserve, adequate staffing of students on site at school number 10, who will be able to deliver instruction in PE and music, special education, including speech, language, and motor services, and lap services and other interventions such as ELL, which are critical to students finding success. We'll need adequate counseling staff on board, on site, who can meet the increasingly complicated emotional needs of our students as well.
And Ron, if you could finish up your last comment.
Definitely.
I'm going to yield my time to. Okay.
Thank you.
There we
Third, please consider that there is no real playground at the Boys and Girls Club. The nearest play area is the athletic field down the hill. In the absence of usual playground equipment, students will need adequate and trained staff who can structure constructive play activities for them. Students need and deserve adequate physical on-site activity during recess in order to be prepared to learn in the classroom. Finally, please formulate some transportation arrangements that make sense and do not result in the loss of instructional time or long walks from school or to school. Please allocate sufficient resources to make on-site transportation a reality. Walking to and from Gig Harbor High School to catch a bus is not a reasonable expectation. In summary, teachers at Discovery want to collaborate with you and be part of the solution that will minimize the negative impact of teaching and learning at a remote site. We want to foster a sense of community, which will ultimately facilitate learning and growth in our students. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, with that, Carol's done. All right, that is it. So we will move on to district reports. We have Elena Brown tonight with our Audit and Finance Advisory Committee report to the board.
Thank you. My name is Elena Brown. I am currently serving as the chairman of the Audit and Finance Advisory Committee. I just wanted to report this evening that our committee met on Monday, March 18th, with our members of our committee with Karen Anderson and Trevor Carlson, a representative from Piper Jaffray, and members of the board. We discussed details of the upcoming bond sale. Mr. Carlson basically shared with us that evening the presentation he gave to the school board on March 7th and asked questions that we had about what the plans were. At that time, we made plans to meet monthly going forward as the bond issues progress. Our next meeting will be in April. The date is to be announced because that will be an exit committee for the state auditors, and then from there on, it will be monthly. In attendance for our committee were myself, Richard Samuelson, and Jay Johnson. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, we are going to move on to old business. 8.1, Dr. Jarvis will provide us with some information on, school number 10 timeline.
Thank you, Madam President. The recommendation for 8.1 really is the recommendation for the timeline on school number 10. As I alluded to a few minutes ago, the basic recommendation is that the target date for opening the new school number 10 will be the fall of 2020. And the clarification on that is that the use of the Boys and Girls Club in the fall of 19 will not be the opening of school number 10. It will be used for the next item, but the overcrowding in the fall. And that date, because it is a change date from the original target of 2022, was enabled by the purchase of the Boys and Girls Club facility. The addition that we are planning to bring that school to a total of 30 classrooms as promised to the community and the district. That addition will be brought to bid in approximately November of 2019 and completed in construction in time for the fall of 2020. I also noted during the study session and in the recommendation that the backup position would be a contingency if necessary to use the classrooms at Henderson Bay. It would be strictly a contingency if for any reason we were not prepared to open in the fall of 2020 the addition yet, that we would be able to open that school in the fall of 2020 guaranteed. Part of that issue is that it's very difficult to open a new school a month or two late if you don't have any place to put the kids in the meantime. So in this case, I can state to the board that with the addition, which we truly believe can and will be completed for the fall of 2020 and done on time, we will be opening on 2020, and if for any reason there was a delay of any kind, we will implement the contingency plan to make sure we can open in the fall of 2020. So the rest of the information in terms of the timeline for the planning principle, the naming of the school, et cetera, will all have its own timeline, but the specific piece we're asking for approval of the board is that the target date for completion of school number 10 will be the fall of 2020, and by the fall, it is the school opening day of the 2020-2021 school year. I recommend approval.
Okay. Thank you. So is there a motion to approve the timeline for elementary school number 10 as presented by Dr. Jarvis?
I move that we accept Dr. Jarvis's recommendation.
Okay. Is there a second? Okay. It has been moved by Marcia and seconded by Lori to approve the timeline for elementary school number 10. Do we have it? There's discussion? Any discussion? I had one question. If, Dr. Jarvis, the school 10 will not be open by the fall of 2020, and we need to use our contingency plan. At what point would we know that in the process? Because obviously we'd have to set up a school in Henderson Bay and prep our teachers.
We basically have already put it into play that we're going to begin this spring looking at the contingency and what that would mean. So lay out an entire timeline of making sure that Henderson Bay High School and the students in the high school are cared for, and it would begin as an example that if necessary we can control the intake in the fall, so that all the way along in the fall of 19 and the 1920 year is planning for that contingency, even if we consider that remote. So we'll have the dual plans. If the contingency needed to be invoked, here's what we would do and here's where we would be. If it's not necessary, then here's the alternate plan and normal operations. So that really begins immediately with this timeline to make sure that that contingency plan is in place and that there's no sort of late or last minute interruption or surprises by someone who says, well, what's going to happen to my child, or will this be real?
Okay, fantastic. Any other questions? So with that, I'll repeat. It's been moved by Marcia and seconded by Lori to approve the timeline for elementary school 10 as presented by Dr. Jarvis. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion has been approved. Okay. We'll now move on to 8.2, Boys and Girls Club Plan for Fall of 2019. Dr. Jarvis, will you provide us with some information on this item?
Yes, and obviously it's tied with the item you just took action on. Originally, not too many weeks ago, we were looking at a plan of opening number 10 partially as a K-3 in the fall of 19. And what really became apparent as we listened both to people and began the planning was that we still had that issue, what I have referred to probably for several months now as the hole that has been dug very deep. Where do we put our classes? We can't use more portables. We have more kids showing up. We have kids in the system now who seemingly will move from grade to grade and leave kindergarten behind and add another first grade or add another second grade. So the collective on that put us in a position where the recommendation, in short, is to use the facility that is now the Boys and Girls Club and will become the core of school number 10, to use that in the fall of 2019 to house children and provide classrooms really throughout the system. The way that would work would be, for example, the 2 preschool programs that are currently out of Harbor Heights because of the fire will continue to stay in their location in the Boys and Girls Club for another year. The 2 early childhood programs from Purdy would be, the kids and the staff would be moved to the Boys and Girls Club for the fall of 19. That opens up 2 classrooms at Purdy. We're able through at Voyager and Purdy and Harbor Heights and to be able to then have classrooms that we can use for K-5 rooms. And then the other school obviously affected is Discovery. And under this plan, we would be, as you heard, looking at currently you're not being asked to approve which classrooms go there because that's still being worked through at all levels, but to know that we would use up to 4 classrooms for Discovery Elementary. And then in that process, as you've also heard the comment, Mr. Witter, how do we make that work for the kids? How do we do it safely? How do we do the transportation, the supervision, excuse me, a very real school experience that doesn't have the kids on an island. But the predominant use is that part of the school will be used for the preschool, which frees up classrooms at their home schools. Part of the school, Boys and Girls Club, would be used for Discovery overload. And what I'm asking the board is permission to use the Boys and Girls Club for the fall of 19 for overload classrooms in that plan.
We don't need a motion for this.
I would recommend it,
would?
yes,
Okay, so
for action,
fall-
just to
February.
approve that use of the Boys and Girls Club.
So I'll make a motion to accept your recommendation.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? Yes?
I have a question. As you look at moving overcrowded areas, will the older students, intermediate students be targeted for making that? Or, I was just thinking about what the combination of age groups might be. Or have you even thought about that? Or you can come back to us with that.
We've given it lots of thought, probably starting with our suggestion that we could mix the high school students at Henderson Bay with elementary and then backing up on that one. So we've given lots of thoughts. In this case, we felt like the kids who are currently on the school campuses, which would be preschool through 5, really that mix isn't any different in the Boys and Girls Club use. We haven't added any older kids, we haven't added any other younger, so it's really a mix that we already see at Purdy and Harbor Heights and others with the preschool experience. So we don't think there's a problem with that, but we also recognize that the building lends itself to the 4 classrooms on what I would call the north end of the building to be used for discovery, and the southern half of the building, there's actually a wall and there's a door and an entryway, so there's really separation. We can operate almost as 2 entities and make that work for the kids. The 2 preschool classrooms we're currently using are downstairs with outside exits. We are exploring whether the option would be at all feasible to have all 4 of the preschools upstairs in that southern half rather than have 2 of them downstairs. But that will depend to some extent on how many new kids show up on our doorstep and where they are this fall. So that's a long answer to your question. Really is mixing the ages, but that's how
actually, I'm not concerned about mixing the ages, but because it's going through a transition, and I'm sure you've considered this, but if you placed 5th grade classrooms in that building, they wouldn't be going back to their home school. They would be moving on to middle school, and that might limit the transition concern, that's all. So on your radar screen.
Yes, that actually was a very specific consideration for what classes might be moved out of Discovery, and we talked about which kids would boomerang in a sense of if we put other age groups there and then put them there for 1 year and then moved them out the next year, that this would be easier if we were looking at the 5th graders who are already going to be moving on to middle school. I'm sorry, I didn't follow the question, but yes, that was very definitely a factor.
David?
Yeah, actually, I'm just wondering about the planning timeline for this transition. So, what does the collaboration look like? How is it scheduled out? As you have planned for the building of the school, number 10, how are we planning for the overcrowding for 19 and 20, and what does that look like? And staff input, all of those things encompassed.
Working backwards a little bit, the opening of number 10 in 2020 was very intentionally set because that resolves that problem of the fall of 2020 needing another 7 to 10 classrooms. Right now, it's looking more like 10 than it would be 7.
At the overcrowding.
And so that second year, not just this fall, but that second year, if we didn't have the school open, we would be scrambling, looking for another 10 classrooms. And so that was very much a factor in getting that school open and promising that we can get it open in 2020. That limits this to a 1-year situation. Then, as if you give permission this evening for us to actually use it in say we will be using this for the overcrowding, and you've already given permission to us to plan on 2020, then we'll put everything in motion and figure out hopefully every question out there. We actually had, if I may pick on Patrick for a minute, he was over at the Boys and Girls Club today looking at the potential, and I'll just pick one piece of it, what kind of play toy would be put in place for the preschool, so that there would be an exercise unit there, and how could that be done on that site. So we've already begun those kinds of pieces. Ms. Anderson is also responsible for transportation, so she's already in that process of trying to figure out what that would mean and how to do it. I think you heard a list of concerns from Mr. Witter earlier. All of those fit in. How do we do this? The suggestion will be that as we employ the planning principle for school number 10, that planning principle will be on site in that building, and will also then we'll have a person in an office responsible for that. So I'm using those as examples of trying to take every single detail from this evening and then be able to implement that and carry it out to answer questions. And I suspect as we get into that, we'll get other questions we haven't even, I hope we've considered most of them at this point, but we'll bump into others that are peculiar to the site. And I hope that we can make that work very, very well for the teachers, the kids, and have it a very good experience, and not something where they feel like they've been put on an island for 9 months.
Yeah, yes, please do.
So, in addressing the overcrowding for next year, if we kind of think about it in tiers, that the tier 3, which is intensive with our language, is discovery for most people, and this plan would include 3-4 classrooms. The next group up that needs the second most really are Purdy and Harbor Heights, which is where that recommendation came from, and how we have 2 classrooms in each of those 2 schools. Then we look at the other ones in our projections and what sections we're expecting, and we don't believe there would be very many other classrooms. A few specialist classrooms may need to be used, but we think very few STEM classrooms would need to be cannibalized. And so we feel pretty good about it with this plan, that it will keep each school in pretty good shape for 1 year, and that's hopefully all we need.
So I wasn't concerned so much, I see we're addressing the overcrowding, I'm looking at transition. And I'm looking at the planning for that transition, and that's kind of, I may not have asked that question well.
I can address that also. So our plan is, just for a little timeline, is to get a word out to all the parents that will be moving tomorrow morning, and then more of a wider posting for the whole district on the website and on school sites to explain the plan, the timeline, and then meet over the next couple weeks with the different associations and the teachers and the classified staff that are impacted, so that we can start getting all the questions and all the concerns like you heard from Mr. Winter today, so that we can start working through all those plans.
And maybe I'm just not understanding, but I guess I would think that you would have those conversations with staff first before parents?
We did.
Okay.
But we told them it would be kind of confidential until you have this chance tonight to talk. But Lisa and I have spoken to the preschools, and I went and met with Mr. Brooks and the part of the discovery staff.
Okay, thank you.
Lori? Any other thoughts?
Just, well, as it has been discussed, I think I'm assuming we will take the valuable experience of having Discovery already over there for 4 days this fall, and see what we learn from that, and go, obviously take the good and work on the bad. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of an exciting thing to have to draw on.
Yeah.
That we've already sort of did
Yes. Yeah, I know, as I was sitting here thinking about, as just a reminder to all of us that we had a severe overcrowding problem that we didn't know what we were going to do with until 2022. And so I'm glad that we have this issue to discuss, and so thank you for bringing this to us, and that we do have this space available to help alleviate overcrowding as early as 2019. So thank you. And I guess moving any teacher there, any classroom there, you're going to have issues with any that you need to address and give resources to, and I'm glad you guys are taking that proactive approach. So, all right, so anything else? Students, did you have anything? Marcia?
I'm going to come back to the transitions issue, though, and so I hear that we're going to put all grade levels there. Will there then be an assumption, if I'm going there this year, that I'm first in line for the magnet school the following year?
By the particular grade levels we've chosen, the 5th grade will be in the middle school, and the preschoolers will not be part of that. They're in the developmental preschool.
Right, but the other grades, if you're putting K through 4 there,
K through 5.
next year, but the K through, I'm talking about
You're talking about the fall of 2020.
I'm talking about the fall of this year, and the students that are housed at the Boys and Girls Club for next year. Is there a perception that if my first grader goes to the Boys and Girls Club next year, that they will have a spot in the magnet school?
That's,
assuming we
I
go
guess
there?
what I'm saying, we're the only students at the Boys and Girls Club for this coming year will be the 5th graders and the preschool.
There will be no first graders there.
5th graders and
Only
preschool,
Only 5th graders?
yes.
We have,
Okay.
4
I
classrooms.
didn't hear that.
And it was really done intentionally, so we didn't have 1st and 2nd and 3rd graders who were there for a year and then going somewhere else, whether it was Purdy or Discovery or for the year after.
I like that.
That eliminates one whole transition. They just move on to
Right.
middle school.
Right.
Okay, so it has been moved by David and seconded by Leslie to approve the use of the Boys and Girls Club facility in the fall of 2019 to offset overcrowding as presented by Dr. Jarvis. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion has been approved. Start planning. Okay, we'll move on to new business. We'll move on, Resolution 1904, bond delegation by series.
I mentioned at the last board meeting that it may not be as exciting as actually visualizing the buildings, but this is where the money comes from. So it's actually a huge step. You have reviewed the resolutions. The basic plan that's contained within this Resolution 1904 is that it authorizes a sale of bonds not to exceed $100 million. And you have to look at that a couple times, make sure the right number of zeros are there, but not to exceed $100 million, and at least probably $70 million with the final amount to be determined by the bond underwriters and their recommendation to us based on the bond conditions and the sales conditions. I offer Ms. Anderson as the expert in the finance division here, but this has come to you with the development of Cynthia Weed. You heard from our bond attorney, and we've tried to incorporate any and all of the questions. I think the one significant change from last time based on the conversation was that rather than have one resolution that authorizes 2 or 3 sales, we will authorize each sale by a resolution of the board, and that still have the freedom to call for the second sale as needed. It conceivably, if the bond market was getting very volatile and the recommendation was to move the second sale up for some reason or other, we would notify you that we needed a special board meeting, and within 24 hours hold a special board meeting if necessary. Right now, that is not the plan. The plan is very comfortably to do the first sale, and at the time that we would schedule the second sale, give you plenty of notice as a board that there will be another resolution that authorizes the time frame and the amount for that sale. So Ms. Anderson and I recommend to you the Resolution 1904, and she gets all the hard questions.
Okay, so I think we'll first move, is there a motion to adopt Resolution 1904, bond delegation by series?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second it.
Okay. Is there discussion prior to the vote?
Of course.
Marcia?
At what point do we decide what the amount of bonds that are going to be sold this spring?
On Monday, we will have our Moody's rating conference call. At the same time, we will be going through our preliminary official statement. After that, and going through that and doing due diligence, we will have a due diligence call. During that time, we will have a conversation about any changes. We've actually pulled the construction cash flow and the need for what funds we'll need over the next year and a half. And so that may drive the amount that we're looking at higher based on what we need. But it wouldn't be more than, we're looking at somewhere between 70 and 90. So I would say that within the next week, we would solidify that amount, and we would take that to the Audit and Finance Advisory Committee, just to share that information so that it's coming back through the committee.
I would add one other item, and being the eternal optimist, the bond market can turn volatile, and it can turn volatile in our favor. If in the underwriting process and the sales, we should have a day where that's going to be the best price on bonds that we could get for months, the underwriter would immediately make the recommendation to sell more and sell them at that lower rate than they expect to have happen, and be able to do that. Obviously, the flip side of that could occur, that would say we don't want to sell more than necessary because right now the bond market is doing things that aren't as favorable. But that also factors into that final decision that really doesn't get made until the morning and they work on New York time. So we've been to their offices. They'll be working the bond sales starting about 5 a.m. in the morning. And in a way, part of the answer to your question is it may not get finally decided within that range until 7:52 a.m. on the day of the sale.
So that can be moved, and actually the official bond statement, as it is ultimately printed, doesn't have the amounts. The actual sale fills the
Correct.
actuals in. So
Correct.
when your salesmen are going out and selling, do they have a pretty good idea of how much they're going to sell? There's quite a difference between 70 and 100.
Yeah, and I would say that that's why we're looking at the numbers right now, so that we can kind of see based on what the need is, so that we can get closer to what that target number would be. And then if there is a fluctuation with the bond market, if we need to go down, we can go down. But we're looking at, there's a potential that we will need more than 70 million just to meet, because we've moved the construction projects up. We will need that.
The other answer I think that might help other people in answering your question is that eventually we'll sell $198,550,000 that was authorized. And the question is, how much of it do you want to sell on this date and how much do you want to sell on that date? Part of the answer is, what do we need? How fast are we spending the money? So as we accelerate school number 10 from 2022 to 2020, we just spent more money sooner than we would have otherwise. And that's actually a good thing in the bond world. They like to see us spending money inside of the 3 years. So what we're trying to do right now is to figure out that sweet spot between 70 million and 198 million. In this case, we know we're not going to exceed 100, but somewhere in that 70 to 90 is what we would expect. And it's this complicated piece that's the bond market, the sales, the cash flow, the conditions, and try to make it all work for the district. That says, over time, we have done our very best due diligence to get the best price and have the money we need to be on track for the projects.
Thank you for making it reality and understanding that this is not a simple process.
It is, and it shouldn't be simple for $198 million. It should be very well controlled, and it is.
Leslie? Lori?
That all mine answered at the last meeting.
Okay. Marcia, additional?
I don't think so. I'm good.
All right. Students? You don't want to tackle the bond? Okay. It's next semester.
They should go to the bond sale.
Yeah, actually, that would be
Yeah,
great.
that would be
Okay,
interesting.
so it has been moved by Leslie, and it was seconded by Lori, I heard you too, but, to adopt Resolution 1904, bond delegation by series. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion has been approved.
So we don't need, because it's a resolution, we don't need to do a roll call vote. Just a question.
Should we
No.
do a roll call? No?
We don't have to, but you certainly can.
I don't have a need,
To-
just.
Since I heard all ayes, I think we'll.
Again, as people might be interested in that question, a motion followed by a voice vote is very effective. It's recorded in the minutes, and it says the board approved this. The resolution advances that to something that's very defined of what the board was exactly approving. So there's no question of what was in that resolution and what you were authorizing. I couldn't misstate it, you can't misstate it, because you're approving that resolution. The third level is the hiring of a superintendent, which is one of the few times you have to do, by law, a roll call vote that says, each of you stands individually responsible for what happened.
Well, thank you for that. Didn't
You're welcome.
know that? Good. Okay, we will move on to 9.2, Resolution 19-05, proclaiming April 27th, 2019 as Parks Appreciation Day. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 19-05, proclaiming April 27th, 2019 as Parks Appreciation Day?
We gonna read it?
Is there, are we going to read it?
How lengthy is the resolution? I know sometimes we read the resolution.
I know, I don't think we were going to
You don't need to
tonight.
read
Did
it?
you want to read the proclamation?
Proclamation, do we need to read it? I don't care. Okay,
No. Okay.
just a question.
Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion?
Of course, I have a
Of course you have
question.
A question? Marcia?
I just, I would like to just make sure everyone understands that there are two park districts in our school district, and that, so, and if we were going to name people, you know, in handing out this resolution or presenting it at one of their commissioner meetings, we should do it for both.
Absolutely. Parks, both Key and Penn met. Thank you, Marcia. Okay, it has been moved by David and seconded by Marcia to adopt Resolution 1905 proclaiming April 27th, 2019 as Parks Appreciation Day. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion has been approved. Okay, we are now moving on to recommendation of architecture firms for the 2019 bond projects.
I've asked Ms. Anderson as the person responsible for the facilities department to speak on this item.
We requested qualifications for architects and received 11 proposals. From that, we chose to interview 5 firms. And from that interview process, we selected 3 firms for our projects, 4 projects. Site number 10 and the Evergreen Elementary School, we are recommending TCF Architecture. For site number 9, we are recommending Integris Architecture. And for the Artendale Elementary project, we are recommending BCRA Architects. It was a great interview process. A lot of good dialogue, good questions, conversations back and forth. All firms were excellent, and it was a lot of negotiating and a lot of conversation to narrow it down. I don't think any of the individuals on the panel felt that we were going to come out of it with one firm, but none of the firms said they could do all 4 projects, so, so we kind of, and then it was just a matter of narrowing down and trying to fit architects with the projects. And so this is our recommendation.
Thank you, Karen. Is there a motion to approve the recommendation of selected architectural firms for the 2019 bond elementary school projects and move forward in negotiating contracts with the selected firms?
I move approval of the recommended architectural firms for the 4 projects.
Is there a second? Second. Okay. Is there any discussion prior to the vote?
I would
David?
just say that I'm glad that there's 3 architect firms designing the schools rather than just one. That way we have multiple teams working on different styles and visions for the school instead of one particularly architect firm that might all have the same way of thinking for the new school. So I'm happy that we have 3. Okay?
Thank you. Marcia?
And I know you did background checks on all the people that came to the table. Specifically, did you look into the project managers that they are going to assign to the project? I mean,
Yes.
okay.
Yes, we did. We've also asked them, typically, architect firms work with engineer firms, and we've done engineers through specialty consultants. We did a separate RFQ for engineers, but we are also working with those firms to make sure that they can still work with firms that we might have on our roster as opposed to the firms that they like to work with. So, yes, we did a lot of double checking.
To share a mic. I'm just curious to know if there's a brief answer. What would make a firm more like suited to do the Evergreen project over the Artendale? Like their skill set would be more suited to this particular site?
I think it's size and scope. Looking at the abilities of the firms, we looked at some of the size and scopes of the projects, and kind of the timing of the projects, what was going to happen when, and so we looked at that along with.
Thank you.
Each of the, I would have to say, each of the firms did come in and they kind of gave us their wish list of which schools or projects they felt they would be more suited for. But I wouldn't say that that's the way we went 100%.
Students? No? Just one kind of quick question in terms of the timing and the timeline. How did they all react to the aggressive timeline we have on our building?
I think that's why they said they couldn't do all 4 projects. I think there were a few, I think there were a couple of firms that weren't quite sure that we could meet those timelines or that they could meet those timelines. But they were definitely challenged, and all firms were pretty positive about the aggressiveness of the timelines.
Okay. All right. It has been moved by Marcia and seconded by Lori to approve the recommendation of selected architectural firms for the 2019 bond elementary school projects and move forward with the negotiating contracts with the selected firms. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion has been approved.
And I'd just like to interject a comment that with that approval, we will both negotiate the final contracts with the architects, but also those architects will begin virtually instantly working with our staff and our schools and our community. And so you'll see evidence of this work within hours, if not days.
Can you touch briefly with the group in here about a little bit more about the community, how they're going to be out there in the community as far as developing their ideas?
I want to do a quick division of ed specs and educational specifications. One set really doesn't, one of my comments does not really even fit that. It's that the district has to work with them to identify our standards. So that could be a locking system for the front door, it could be the PA system or the electronics, but we have to identify our standards. A second part of the ed spec process is that all 4 schools will have certain specifications that are common to all 4 of those schools and probably as many schools as we can build thereafter. They will set a new standard for the district. So we'll be doing that set and then giving that set of ed specs to all 3 architectural firms. And then the fourth, or the next piece, part B of the ed specs, is that they'll work specifically with the Evergreen staff and the Evergreen community and parents on the other expectations and work at Evergreen, and the same for Artendale, and the same. It gets a little trickier on number 9 and 10 because we don't have any kids or parents identified with that yet, but we'll be soliciting then people that can work with those architects and pulling meetings together to develop those ed specs. Then the architect, in essence, takes those specs back and develops a first conceptual plan that they bring back to the district, and progressively then it works its way through all the way from the very beginning conversations up to the final drawings that go out for contractors to bid on.
Excellent. David says thank you. Okay, with that, 9.4, specialty consultant contracts for 2019 bond projects. Is there a motion to approve the specialty consultant contracts for 2019 bond projects?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion prior to the vote?
I want to take the fun part for just a second. The recommendations for EHSI, PBS, HBB, AHBL, ESM, AESI, and a couple others. Then I'm going to let Ms. Anderson actually explain what that's all about.
Sorry, I didn't like that up. Sorry.
So we have recommended, we went out for RFQ for specialty consultants. There are a lot of land use surveys, things that need to happen right away. So we have before you 17 of those contracts from the specialty consultants for these reasons. They'll be doing such thing as land use, the ALTA survey, the Phase 1 ESA. There's a lot of acronyms. I don't know all the specifics. There will be geotech, and then we also have Integris that will start developing some of the preliminary ed spec conversations to get us going. And so basically these are the contracts that we're bringing forward to you for all of these services. There's a matrix and the dollar amounts that are attached to those contracts.
All right. With that, is there any discussion? No? Okay. It has been moved by David and seconded by Marcia to approve the specialty consultant contracts for 2019 bond projects. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion has been approved. And thank you to the district and Dr. Jarvis and everyone getting this information to the board ahead of time. We had a lot of time to look at this, so thank you, and thank you for board for taking that time. Okay, we will then move on to 9.5, policy 7325, consultants, and this is the first reading only. Policy 7325 is being presented for the first reading tonight. Is there any discussion regarding the proposed revisions to this policy?
The only thing, this is policy, this isn't procedures, correct?
This is the policy part of it.
Could I clarify, are we going to take action on a first and then a second reading? Or, we've had this discussion before, so since you're here, I would like to clarify that.
The Peninsula School District has in policy the ability to change a policy on the first reading or the second reading. Actually, you can change it on the third or fourth if you wish, but normally it would be the first or second. Typically, we won't ask for approval on the first reading unless there's an urgency to that that's really embedded in the topic. In this case, we are recommending to you that policy 7325 be updated from its 2001 status, and recognize that it's been a few years since we've hired the specialty consultants and under this policy. So recommending that for first reading, and that first reading would, if there's any discussion or a desired change on your part, we will take that back and bring it back to you in second reading. If there's no change recommended, we'll still bring it back to you on the second reading. So there's no, we will ask for approval on the first reading, but that does not adopt the policy. It simply sets the stage for the second reading.
The only thing I'd point out is on page 1 of 1, for legal references, on the last sentence, it says 20,000. It hasn't been lined out, changed to 75.
And that, we're recommending that that is,
Oh,
that's the
Yeah,
current.
this is the current and this is
My
the,
fault.
That 20,000 be
Older you.
upgraded. The state auditor,
Do this.
the state auditor and the state capital construction all have, and the purchasing have the allowance that a school district can now hire a consultant up to $75,000, and that meets the audit standards and the accounting standards. So it's been changed that much since 2001 with the cost of doing business. So we're recommending that is the standard used by the state and the audit, and we believe it will work well for us. So we really didn't make it up out of thin air. It's it comes out of a standard.
any other? So I think you bring this back to us as a second reading and we'll move forward.
Oh, I have questions.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were done. Sorry.
No, I didn't ask any on this one. First of all, I'd like to say that I think that changing this policy and the amount in the policy is absolutely appropriate. The question that I have is differentiating between public works projects, not just capital projects, but public works, versus a consultant contract for specialty service and special ed. And I know that this policy doesn't do that, but I'm just wondering about that. I have no problem with a public works contract at $75,000. I'm just wondering about other kinds of contracts that are less. A consultant, a person filling in, an OTPT, you know, that's hired from the outside. There's a lot of different services, so. And it wasn't differentiated in the policy, and curious as to why not.
Basically because we took the policy that the board had in effect and only updated the amount. I didn't change any of so you had not differentiated before the type of consultant, so we didn't change that at all. If there's an interest on behalf of the board that those should be different and public works or capital projects versus others, we can certainly figure out how to do that. But the current policy, the only thing we updated was the amount.
And is there a separate policy on public works and letting of contracts? Because it's a different kind of animal.
In terms of,
I'm putting you on the spot.
State laws.
Oh, yeah,
So it depends on the type of service. There are requirements for certain types of services that we have rosters or that we do
That's Public Works, yeah.
So it's all, we would have to do whatever we're doing, we would have to comply with those laws. Federal laws for procurement, if we're doing a consultant contract, we would have to go through a certain process.
It's complicated all the way around. So I'm ready to make the motion.
I don't think, well, we're not gonna do anything tonight.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
I'm okay with moving ahead with this.
okay. As it is stated here?
Yes.
Okay. And I had that similar question, Marcia, and I appreciated Dr. Jarvis's earlier response in that, you know, this hasn't been updated since 2001, and that amount adjustment seems applicable to 2018, 2019 work, so, 2019 work, jeez. So thank you. So with that, we look forward to that coming back to us. We will move on to 10 information items. 10.1, procedure 6950, construction project change orders. And again, this is procedure, not policy.
The basic understanding, we just took the first step to amend a policy. Now this, in this case, a procedure. The technical definition of the procedure is that it's the administration's effort to implement the policy that's in place for the school district. So it's how do I want to do business, how are we doing business to implement this policy. In this case, we're updating the procedure that would allow us to move on our public works projects, our capital projects, for change orders. Change orders are inevitable. They are part of the process, and really what's in front of you is the recommendation on how we would proceed to handle change orders. The quick version is that right now, again, based on the information that was in place, is change orders not exceeding $25,000 may be authorized by the superintendent. We're asking that that be updated to $100,000 can be approved by the superintendent. Now, these are change orders that would be affecting contracts, you know, I'll make it up, but $25 million or $30 million or $35 million. So there is an amount of the change order. Then there's a second level of $250,000 that would require the superintendent and the board president to sign off on that. In each case, it allows the project to continue. It doesn't stall the project waiting for board approval. If it's in excess of $250,000, it would come to the whole board for approval before it was acted on. I would emphasize that no matter who's approving it, if the superintendent, the board president, or the full board, all of those come to the board for your knowledge. It's simply a matter of how do we expedite the process from day to day, week to week, and the process. So a delay in something or other, the steel, or a spec that needs to be changed because the drawings didn't have the corners meet in the corner, could be a $125,000 change order. So at that point, because it would be more than 100, I would call up the board president and say, you and I are being asked to sign off on this. All of those will go to the audit and finance committee also, and that's part of the review process that's built in. And then all of them come to the board for that accounting and awareness, and they're all public. So it really moves it from asking the board's permission that as you see this procedure, you're aware of it and it's consistent with what you want. If you don't see it consistent, then basically what you do is reject it and give it back to me and say, here's what we'd like to see differently in your procedure, because for whatever reason you don't feel it's carrying out the policy in the way you would like to see it carried out. So I would recommend procedure 6950P to you, and you'll see also the contingency amount of 8% of the maximum allowable cost is also a control that's built into that, So you can't add up all the change orders and get wildly different than the contract itself.
Thank you. With that, is there any discussion regarding the proposed revisions to the procedure? Leslie?
I just had a quick question. My preference is to see the procedure, or the policy, in addition to the procedure, so that I can compare and see, and contrast to see if the procedures actually encompass the spirit of the policy, or does the policy need to be changed based on the procedures? I don't know that, because I don't have that in front of me.
I can certainly get that to you.
That would be great, thank you.
I would agree with that comment. And looking at the procedures, this is very complicated when you get into big projects. And I agree that the change order policy needs to be changed and there needs to be thresholds. I think that it's sort of a push-pull between what's in policy and what's in procedure. And I'm thinking that there may be some little pieces that are in the procedures that really should be in the policy or reflected in the policy, different levels, and even talking about percentage, maximum number of change orders. I'm not sure. I read through the procedure and I still am thinking we need some changes, but I didn't go back and look at the policy again.
David?
No, I support the recommendation.
Okay, so it sounds like we need to get the policy in front of us, and then we can have further discussion if we need to move some of the procedures up into policy and decide on that later. Is that?
That's fine. I mean, the current procedure will stay in place until
Okay.
we have your comfort. If there is something that comes up where I would need to do something beyond the current policy, you might get tapped in a hurry.
Okay.
But we'll.
For clarification, I'm fine if you need to move forward with the procedures with the understanding that they may change once we review the policy. It's certainly something the board can consider if you feel that there's a time constraint attached to this.
Marcia,
The
you
question
agree with that?
are there time constraints? And I'm, at this point, we're not doing any major projects. When I look at things that are maybe public works, that are not capital projects, I think there's a differentiation there that maybe needs to come into play, and or changing the policy, or changing the amount based on purchase orders. I have questions about that, so.
Let me just give one piece of background that I probably should have said earlier. The policy really makes a statement to the effect of whatever the board has authorized the superintendent to do. So the policy didn't need to be changed unless you actually wanted to change the policy. Unlike the one you just worked on where there was an amount that hadn't been changed since 2001, the policy says whatever you've authorized the superintendent to change, she has to stay within that. So that's where the procedure comes in, and that's why the particulars are in the procedure and not in the policy. So the 8% that applies to a large project of multi-million looks considerably different if the 8% is a $10,000 change order, or I mean $10,000 item with an 8% change order. So that's the reason the policy in effect says you have to reach agreement with your administration on carrying this out based on the scope of the project. So you'll see the policy just says whatever you've authorized the superintendent. That's why we're coming to you with the procedure and not the policy. Doesn't mean you can't revise the policy, and I would normally advise against putting numbers in the policy because you get caught in, like we did 2001, numbers that don't fit 2019. But in this case, it's really more a matter of what are the scope of the projects that you're envisioning, and how do you build in a procedure that accommodates the large scope projects with multi-million dollars as well as the small projects that are a few thousand. And still deal with a percentage of, what does that percentage mean? So in effect, that's why it's happening the way it is. I'm comfortable, if we get pressure or we need to come back to you with something that's in excess of the current procedure, then I will let you know in a hurry. And I'll bring this back together with the policy next month. And if, I would ask if anybody has suggestions on what you would like to see differently in the procedure, to let me know in the meantime so that I can bring that back as part of the discussion for next meeting.
Okay. I'd like to extend that discussion a bit more in that and clarify with the board. If, I know we're early on in the stages of all of this, and so we probably won't need to act on this at all, but are we okay as a board with the acting on the procedures as proposed tonight, with knowing that we will be looking at policy and potentially changing something in the future? I just don't want the board to be in the way of holding something up if we're okay with this tonight. I heard that you were okay.
I am, but I thought that I had read in the original policy that the board chair has some leeway there. So,
Okay.
but again, it's fine, just understanding that
We may need to.
it has to be fluid. It might be fluid.
Absolutely.
I would just recommend that we agree to move forward with the current changes in the procedure, because once the architects get started, it's going to be fast and furious, and I don't really want to stand in their way.
But we haven't awarded any bids yet, so I don't see that as.
And again, I don't
Yeah.
think there will be any issues, but.
There's just some, I don't have a problem with the amounts, the authorization for the superintendents. The thresholds, or, referring to the MAC and all the rest of that, and the percentages, I'm thinking, there's minor capital projects, that language doesn't work for me.
Okay.
I'm not sure that the 8% works for me. It may need to be higher than that for a larger project, and lower than that for some middle projects, so.
Well, if it comes up, we will
Okay?
manage it there, and then we'll address it at the next board meeting. Moving on then to 10.2 procedure 7325 procedure consultants. Procedure 73.25 consultants is being presented as an information item to the board. Is there any discussion? Do you want to introduce this?
In essence, this is what the procedure will look like if and when you amend your policy. So it's not to get ahead of you. Right now, if we walk out of the meeting, you will have a policy that still has the 2001 figure and a procedure that's recommending the higher one, but know that we've already accounted for that. We'll operate under the old policy and the old procedure until you've actually amended the policy.
Thank you, Dr. Jarvis. Okay, moving on then to item 11, consent agenda. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda prior to the vote? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It has been moved by David and seconded by Leslie to approve the consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The consent agenda has been approved. I'd like to now move on to board discussion and comments. Leslie, if you'd like to start, if you.
Been busy, but in a different way. I actually attended, City Club of Tacoma had a panel discussion regarding McCleary. And some of the highlights, not a whole lot has changed. Things are just moving. They're just waiting to see what happens in the legislature to see what's going to pass and what they're going to support as far as things like transportation, special ed, and other things. There's certainly been some conversations about the levy lid, so we'll see what that looks like. Terry Bergeson, former superintendent of public instruction, was there. I think Representative Dolan, and I think there was a the president of the Tacoma Teachers Union. I forgot her name. Angel, thank you. And it was a quite robust conversation. It was a very engaging conversation, and we will just have to wait and see what happens. But it was very, very interesting, and I am hopeful.
Thank you. Ms. Lori?
I just wanted to bring a couple exciting high school things to your attention. It's weird because you're behind me, I feel like, but you may know this already, all of you, but congratulations to Casey for your nomination as Student of Distinction. That's awesome. So,
Oh, great.
I saw it. And also, I had the opportunity to talk extensively a few days ago with Karen Kennedy Floyd, who teaches English at Gig Harbor High School, and she is teaching for the first time this semester this year, 2 sections of UW in the high school English 131. And we were just talking, and she was telling me all about that program. She has 2 full sections of 30, and the things those kids are doing in that class are just fantastic. And it was just so interesting. They are doing something called a passion project, and where the kids have grown up, because I don't know if they're, well, they must all be seniors, or at least, upper level, and they have grown up, learning to write well put together papers and all kinds of different mediums. But so she is utilizing that, and under the idea that, your whole life you've had the opportunity to write a paper on a topic that was assigned to you and do it for a grade, and now she's giving them the opportunity to. I wrote down what she actually said because I loved it. Now, in the past, you've written on topics that were assigned to you. Now you get to make a difference in the world, not for the grade, but because what you think and what you do matters. I just thought that was awesome. And she is super passionate about it, so that is cool. But these kids are doing podcasts. They're writing podcasts. They're writing public service announcements in addition to papers. And one student already got a $6,000 scholarship for his project, to implement his project. And they are actually going out and making change in the community already in the middle of the year with these projects. So that was exciting.
This is the UW.
Yeah, this is English 131, but UW in the high school. And, I think they're hoping to have more sections. I think I understand your point, but only because WSU in the high school is not available yet.
Oh, nice.
If it were, it would be better.
Thank you for that, Lori.
Sorry about that. I just
Maybe next
lowered
year.
the level.
Maybe next year. Hilarious. Okay, Marcia?
Putting things together. The Peninsula Schools Education Foundation had a retreat this early in the month, and then a couple of us were working on the application and a letter for ART to send out to all teachers so that we can get Education Foundation grants in by the end of April or 1st of May. And we are changing the process. This is important. We used to do spring and fall. We're going to just do spring. And we will do awards so that teachers that want to buy something for next year don't have to wait till December or January to find out that there's money to do it. And so knowing that that's coming down the pike, you can put that, you can plan for that, even if you don't order things until, August or September, knowing that you're going to do it, and include that. So I think that's pretty wonderful, and I hope we get lots of participation this year. And we tried to make them they have spring break to work on them, so we set the timelines so it wouldn't be due the day before school's out. And so we are, and it's not, by the way, it's not just teachers. Anyone in the school district can apply for a grant. And right now, Dan, you were a great help with that process. Attended the Key Peninsula Business Association dinner at the Civic Center this week. Last Friday night, I had the most fun. They did the Fiesta Chef's Cook-Off. Deb, you were there at the end. But it's, you take 4th and 5th graders, they submit recipes, food service selects the best. 1 to 3 per school. Every elementary was represented, and it just makes you cry. I mean, they're so proud of what they've done, and they talk about things. And the little, the fifth grader from Vaughan, she was the only one from Vaughan, and she cooked, and she got the award for the healthiest meal. So, and her mom was so proud of her, and it's really something that she makes at home. So I encourage you next fall, there'll be a tailgate party next fall. That's what they call it, I think.
Yeah, so
they always have a theme. So that was wonderful. I attended the suicide prevention meeting, which was very informative. And also the Youth Violence Prevention Coalition. I try and go to that each week or each month, because try and see how transportation can support that and intervene with kids. But anyway, it was a fun month, and
Excellent. Good. All right. David? No? Okay. Yes, I did attend the chef
So
thing,
fun.
and it was really good. It was actually by chance that I had forgot. So I was walking through doing another activity, and I hadn't eaten that day. So it worked out really, really well, and the kids probably thought their food was the best because I ate like 5 of each portion of each recipe. So it was really good. I got to go out to Minter Creek yesterday, the day before. And Communities in Schools was out there, and Principal Todd Herring did a presentation about Minter Creek, and then also specifically about Communities in Schools. And there was a lot of grantors there from Tacoma that really got a chance to see what we were doing, and completely impressed. I've always been, but the partnership that we have with CISP in the district is amazing. I was shocked to learn that about 2/3 of the students at Minter Creek benefit from this program. They're in 9 of our schools. That has grown since 2003. They started at Vaughan in 2003 and have grown to 9 of our schools, and pretty darn impressed. So we are very lucky to have that partnership. And then I can't even say I really attended it because I caught the tail end of it, but the tech advisory group just this afternoon. And the only reason why I mention it is because they are already on top of looking at, it's a group of teachers from each building that come together and talk about technology issues and security issues and whatnot. And they're already ready for the testing season, and they're proactively thinking about things that they need to get ready for the testing to make sure it goes smoothly. So I appreciated that. So again, I only attended shortly, so I don't want to really claim it, but I was glad to hear that. So thank you, Chris and Landley, for doing that. And then just, I already mentioned it earlier, but I just want to thank Dr. Jarvis, staff, the district for, I know we are moving fast and furious, but as a board member, I feel very informed. Our questions are getting answered, and we're getting materials so that we can move along with this process, and I really appreciate and thanks to all of you for doing those things. So. With that, one more.
I just remembered, we have a WASDA regional meeting at University Place, April 18th.
Spring break.
Oh,
Just
so
want to throw that out
probably
there.
some people won't be going, but it's close by. I mean, we've driven off to the hinterlands on the last few. So I mean, if, number one, Seabrook, if you want to register, it's
in
just.
Seabrook?
No,
Seabrook.
Oh.
I
know, I'm like, wait a second.
If you want me to go there, I will.
That's perfect.
Sorry.
Okay.
But anyway, just,
Well, and that actually reminds me that WASDA, WASA, the whole group, put together their equity conference that's coming up. I think everyone received an email. So I'm hoping that a large portion of the board can attend. It's I think it's a very valuable experience. I think PSD, we're sending a team, right? Go team! So I'm pretty excited about it, because I think last year was the first year we sent a full team. So I'm really excited that we're sending more this year.
I need to look and see. Let me look
Okay.
at my
Thank you. We are now on to 13 executive session. We will have an executive session tonight. It is 7:30, 7:30. We will go into executive session at 7:35, and we'll be in for 30 minutes. There will be no action. The meeting is for purposes of update on collective bargaining personnel.
Another one.